So now let me take the opportunity to introduce the first panel of the day, Insurance Reimagined with Blockchain. So let's please welcome our panelists to the stage. Ed Duzer from RGA Reinsurance Company, Richard Levin from Paulsonelli, Yogs Rao from Swiss Re, and Bo Shevchik from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. This session is moderated by Jason Brett from the Chamber of Digital Commerce. So Jason, over to you.
Thank you, Alan. Welcome, everybody, and excited to be the first panel of the day. We are Insurance Reimagined with Blockchain. The insurance industry manages risk for a living. One of the key existential risks on the horizon for insurance is how blockchain technology is going to disrupt some of the existing business models and service offerings that are current in today's insurance environment. We heard a little bit about healthcare yesterday. We've obviously heard about financial services and blockchain, so I'm very excited as Director of Operations at Chamber of Commerce to introduce my panelists to you and have a great discussion this morning about the role of blockchain and how we might reimagine the insurance industry with it. So to my left, Jeffrey Billingham.
Hi everybody, Jeff Billingham. I sit in the business development group within the financial markets division at IHS Markit, and I'm tasked with sort of looking at surveying all sorts of new technologies and how they will affect capital markets. Blockchain technology, DLT, has certainly been, I think, the biggest portion of that pie for the better part of 2.5 years, so I run the blockchain strategy for the firm.
And Ed Duzer.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Ed Duzer. I'm a technical architect developer for Reinsurance Group of America. I actually focus on the actuarial solutions and underwriting space. I focus on business capabilities like predictive modeling, analytics, valuation in the reinsurance space. Most notably, I also, with my partner Jags Rao, I'm here as the technical representative for B3I for RGA. Thank you.
Richard?
I'm Richard Levine. I'm the chair of the FinTech and Regulation practice at Paulsonelli, which is a national law firm of about 900 lawyers. We focus on representing investment banks, broker-dealers, exchanges, trading platforms, digital currency and blockchain technology firms, insurance firms. Everybody who's exploring how to use FinTech, and I like to say I've been in FinTech since the late 1990s when electronic trading first started, when they were advertising E-Trade accounts with chimpanzees to show you how easy it was. I was a 28-year-old kid with my buddies building a company that we tried to sell to the New York Stock Exchange. They laughed at us. We ended up selling the company to Citibank instead. But my focus is on helping both very large companies and very early stage companies figure out how to develop FinTech in a way that will comply with securities, regulatory, and compliance issues.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bo Shevchik. I do work for the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston as an alliance director with the invoice processing platform, which is Treasury's centralized electronic invoicing system. However, today, I'm actually here as the co-chair for the Association of Government Accountants with their blockchain working group. So the Association of Government Accountants, very quickly, is a government financial management organization that represents about 16,000 state, local, and federal employees. And what we're doing with the working group is actually trying to collaborate, educate, and do blockchain. So I look forward to this conversation.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jags Rao. I represent a Swiss reinsurance company headquartered in Zurich. I lead the blockchain workstream. For about a year, we have been closely experimenting on what blockchain means to our business. Keep asking the same question, why blockchain? And last year, we founded insurance industry's first blockchain initiative, B3I. Ed is part of that consortium now. And that's one piece that we have been now focusing on to generate tangible results. But also at Swiss Re, my mandate is to further our agenda on blockchain to understand what are the business cases we should invest on and develop the competency that is required when using B3I. When the highway is ready, there are enough cars on the road.
Wow, what an exciting lineup where we have an analyst, a technical architect in blockchain, a fintech lead who's an attorney, and a businessman who's in the insurance business from Europe, and a volunteer from the AGA. And we really appreciate volunteers in the blockchain space because it's definitely of interest, and it's just great to see how everybody is really coming to the blockchain as a solution. I want to talk really specifically, and to start with my panel, how does the insurance industry could be helped by blockchain? You know, 1/3 of the use cases that are out there right now are in blockchain are for insurance. So what do you see in terms of use cases? What are you seeing in terms of proofs of concept?
Well, when we started off a year ago, we realized that the most important thing is to understand what is the business problem that we are trying to solve and how acute is that problem. And then ask the question, why blockchain? There are many other technologies. Blockchain is still not mature. And I think that perspective helps because then you are getting into a space where you are trying to address a particular business problem, but you are also assured that this technology is a viable option. And if you look at the insurance, reinsurance industry, we have been financially very healthy, operationally less efficient, and we could afford to do so for many years. But this technology perhaps gives us that opportunity to look at the same problem, but with a different angle. And that's probably the difference that we are seeing now in our industry. Because if we are able to look at our insurance value chain from insured to primary insurance companies to reinsurers like ourselves, retrocession players, all the way up to capital markets, in my opinion, blockchain has the potential to be the new digital transaction processing player. Because it can actually enable transaction flow across multiple layers of counterparties, all the way until the capital markets. And if we can get there, I think that's a tremendous boost. And that's where you can gain the 10x innovation efforts.
Ed?
Yeah, I think that insurance is going through an evolution of sorts, right? So if you look at insurance, a lot of people it's just like the government, as we saw yesterday. I thought seeing Department of the Illinois, state of Illinois, going through the revolution or evolution that they're going through today is the same thing that we're seeing in insurance, right? But we have some questions we have to answer, right? So we can't go into this with saying this is the perfect thing. I got a big hammer, I'm going to hit this nail with this. You have to answer those questions that people have. The senior executives have questions and you need to answer them. Security, well, let's get that out in the open. Let's talk about it transparently. Trust and safety. Let's see what we have to answer that question for. And then I think as you have that dialogue, you're educating yourself and you're educating everybody else around you. So I think you have to look at that as an evolution. It's something that you got to continue just take the next step. So continue to take the next step is what I would say insurance is trying to do. And it's evidenced by B3I. I mean, that's a consortium of 15 members coming together saying, hey, we're interested, we're evolving, we understand, we need to talk, we need to collaborate, we need to get together with our business process and say this is it reimagined. I mean, that's a pretty powerful statement in and of itself that you have those parties getting together saying, what does it look like to be reimagined?
And I think, it's uncanny how this evolution in the insurance industry actually mimics, I think, to a large extent what we've seen in financial markets thus far. I think to get back to use cases, I think I try and abstract and say there are really two interesting tracks to take here. There's sort of first and foremost there's sort of like a payments or sort of digital asset discussion, right? How can you digitize assets and manage payments? And I think that's born out of a lot of what we saw in the digital currency space, years ago. The other part of this conversation, I think, is around record keeping, asset provenance, smart contracts, that kind of thing. And the financial industry, like banking industry, went through quite a lot of this a couple of years ago, and they still continue to iterate on a lot of these use cases. How can we digitize assets that are otherwise on paper, and how can we manage contracts in a way that allow parties to interact with each other and real-time data in a much more operationally efficient space? And I think that's sort of a lot of what the insurance industry is trying to do in its own sort of unique way.
And we're seeing right now, I think McKinsey put out a paper, PwC, others have put out papers, 50% of the potential applications of blockchain technology are in financial services. Of that, roughly 25% are in the insurance sector. And then when you look at the evolution, the financial services industry, if you look at trading of equities, derivatives, et cetera, they're a little further along in the development life cycle, but you're seeing that there is a massive push in the insurance industry to implement blockchain technology. That's putting aside applications like shipping and healthcare, for example, which make up a large portion of the remainder. So financial services and insurance are at least half of what people are thinking about right now for applications of blockchain technology.
Yeah, and lastly, I mean, I'll just kind of throw out a quote here. I just looked this up. Someone likened the U.S. government to really a large insurance company with a sideline in national defense. Today is an auspicious day in a sense that the administration is putting forth its budget. So the budget is going to be about $4 trillion, give or take, right? 2/3 of it is actually non-discretionary, and a lot of it is really entitlements, et cetera, which one can term as insurance. The 1/3 that remains, 1/2 of that, 1/6 is defense, and the other is civilian. When we take a look at the portion of what is really insurance within the federal government, what we're trying to do as the Association of Government Accountants and others is try to make sure that those entities within the government that are looking at that take best practices or practices from industry as to what they're doing with regards to insurance. So this way we better go forward.
So if we were to imagine blockchain truly disrupting the insurance industry, and of course we have words like fintech, and I've heard for regulation, regtech, I think we now have insurtech. And certainly as a couple of reinsurers at the table, I'd love to hear a little bit about what are some of the characteristics that you're looking at that could take place with this disruption? And as an incumbent insurance company, what is the right strategy? And what are the risks to maybe not looking into this technology? Are there other new insurance concepts that you're seeing that may pose a threat if you are existing in an insurance company as you are today?
Yeah, and from my perspective, I'm a technical architect, so I by no means speak on behalf of RGA as the company. But you look at what's the dangers of not looking at stuff. What's the dangers of not being educated about what's out in your environment? I think that's the danger. The danger is that we are stagnant, that we stay idle. And as we stay idle as an industry or as an individual, we will continue to fall behind. Well, I think that's the danger. The danger is that we're going to fall behind. In business, that's losing market share, right? As an individual, that's just that I'm not continuing to evolve as I can. So I think that, to me, is danger is maybe not the appropriate word that I would use, but just saying that we need to continue to evolve and not remain stagnant is what I'm looking at.
Absolutely. I see it as it's an opportunity, but at the same time there is a threat. But it's up to you how you convert the threat into an opportunity. And I think this is a point in time where reinsurance companies realize that this is a vehicle to really help expand and transform your business. And this is not just limited to the incremental innovation, the B3I is focused on that part, but there is also an angle of the disruptive innovation. Blockchain can accelerate the emergence of P2P marketplaces. And if you can imagine a blockchain-enabled platform where protection seekers and investors coming together based on blockchain smart contracts, then it can radically transform the different layers that we have in our industry. And therefore, we are very keen on the disruptive part as well. Do the horizon scanning, talk to insurtech companies. In fact, one of them that we will probably engage with them in an FCA sandbox trial in the UK. I think these are the directions that we should be focusing on. I think we'll make a lot of experience in the next year or so, but that's going to be the guiding force for us going forward.
Yeah, I think the industry is evolving very quickly. 2 years ago, I was speaking at a conference at Stanford, and I told people, I said, okay, blockchain, digital ledger technology, and Bitcoin, At the time, people were saying it was rat poison. You know, Charlie Munger, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett's partner, when asked on an interview, described it as rat poison, and then Bill Gates described it as a techno tour de force during the same interview. So there was a tremendous amount of disagreement about blockchain technology 2 years ago. And then you started seeing a raft of investment banks and insurance companies start to embrace the technology, at least to explore it. So I think we're in a phase of acceleration. But when you look at blockchain and you look at insurance, it can touch every aspect of an insurer's operations, from the client onboarding process to screening those clients to make sure that they're not terrorists, criminals, et cetera, money launderers, to the existence of the insurance contract, to then paying out claims, whether it's in shipping, healthcare, or other insurance areas, property casualty, where there's some type of failure or a claim event, and then the smart contract would be smart enough to trigger and to actually make the payment. So I think that, and then risk management going forward and for use by regulators, there are a number of areas where blockchain technology could play a role in the insurance industry and in the greater financial services industry. And we're still trying to figure that out right now.
Well, it breaks two ways, I think. You've got a number of opportunities to cut costs, become more efficient, right? Work within an industry more collaboratively with each other at a lower cost base. And I think that by definition leads you to that sort of more collaborative, consortium-based approach where, you're not focused on new revenues necessarily, but you've all got to come around the table. You all have to sort of agree to standards. You all, try and sort of work out what are the common shared bottlenecks across this one particular industry. And the other side that I think is it's often less looked at is sort of the new revenue, new markets. What's that truly disruptive, part? How can we actually, find new marketplaces to provide insurance, banking, what have you, with blockchain tech? I think that's a little bit of it's a more difficult nut to crack here. But certainly, I think most of the conversation has been around that cost savings, operational efficiency discussion thus far.
Yeah, I think inclusion, and sorry, just for one more point, I think what you're talking about is inclusion, right?
Right.
And I think that's the social implications of what we're talking about here, right? How do I include? Every business wants to touch as many consumers as they can, right? So how do I create that network effect to include as many people as I can, right? Insurance is trying to say, well, how can I get as many people to understand the benefits of having an insurance policy? That's really what the insurance industry is trying to do. So can blockchain help? Yes. Do we have questions to answer? Yes. Are we there yet? Probably not. But I think we are definitely taking a step in the right direction. Right. So inclusion to me would be that word I think that you hit on.
Yeah, inclusion, accessibility.
Yeah, accessibility, yeah.
Maybe just to add to that point, one of the use cases that we're working on with our clients is a low-cost index-based microinsurance, a crop insurance for farmers in Africa. And we are utterly convinced that this technology can bring down the expense ratio so that you can make this insurance more accessible and affordable to the underprivileged. And that's what keep driving us day in, day out. This technology, in a way, it has extended the options and the possibilities. And as incumbents, I think we have that responsibility to work towards it and see what's real and what's possible.
No, I think the point about inclusion is a tremendous point. Vast portions of the world do not have bank accounts. Yeah. They do not have insurance. They do not have credit cards. They do not have debit cards. But they have smartphones.
Exactly.
They have smartphones that now have retinal scanning, thumbprint scanning, and they have the ability to allow access to cash, access to insurance, access to financial services in a way that in many respects is superior to what you would get at a branch bank.
Yep.
I mean, I would ask how many of you in the audience, when was the last time you went to a bank to deposit a check? Okay, most people would probably say they haven't been there in a year or two because smartphones now have the capability to just take that photograph of that check. So when we talk about insurance, inclusion is very important because there will be large swaths of the world that will have insurance for the first time when they've never had it.
It's amazing to me when I hear someone say smartphone, and you mentioned a little bit about smart contracts in the discussion. Everyone, when you say smartphone, says, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But a lot of times when you hear smart contracts, sometimes you hear people say, well, what's so smart about them? But I think that for me, smart contracts really provides this ability to do automation in insurance, in claims, talking about the inclusion, everyone has a smartphone. Where do you see smart contracts as playing a role in the insurance industry, since really you have a lot of friction sometimes between the beneficiaries, there's a lot of customer service improvements that could be done. So how do smart contracts play in once we have the blockchain squared away?
From my perspective, I think that we need to understand exactly what those contracts look like, right? Privacy is a big thing when you start talking about contracts. Well, how do I embed that into the smart contract? So I was part of the hackathon, or the codeathon, as you guys had called it, just the other day, and I think one of the gentlemen, I forgot his name. I'd give him credit, though, to say smart contracts are not smart nor a contract, right? If you look at them, they're code. They're just a way for you to describe. It's just code that goes onto the chain and says, well, hey, look, if I have these two different, things they're trying to talk through blocks, how that actually works. So when you're looking at smart contracts, I think the industry needs to look at saying, well, how can I provide some contracts that will really help answer those questions, then educate the industry on those contracts. Educate them to say, this is what a contract can look like. This is what we're trying to do for different sectors, right? From just direct cedents to reinsurers to whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, people say, I hear people say, code is law, and I go, no, the law is law. Code is not law. But as the son of a computer scientist, I have to say that the English language and the French language and the German language are nothing more than languages that memorialize the intent of the parties in the contract. Code can do the exact same thing. A smart contract is a scientific mechanism of memorializing the intent of the parties. So yes, a smart contract can be smart, but like any contract, it's only as smart as the people who drafted it. So if you have bad programmers or stupid programmers, you're going to have a stupid contract. And then you're going to come to people like me and say, we need help, resolving the dispute over this stupid contract. So I think when people say smart contracts, I always like to point out, yes, they are very similar to standard contracts written in any common language, and they're plagued with the same flaws of those contracts, which are they have to be as smart as the person who drafted it.
So that's an interesting point. Where do you see the legal realm getting involved with smart contracts? Do you see that as a potential?
Well, if you have sons or daughters that are computer scientists, let them know that law firms may need them in the future. We've been having an ongoing discussion in our firm about, do our lawyers need to learn how to code? And we're not the only firm having that discussion. I don't think we're all going to become coders, but I do think a functional understanding of code will be important to be able to function in this industry going forward. Because as large insurers and consortia use smart contracts and use code to memorialize their intent, you're going to have to be able to understand the code or you're going to be left behind.
So, speaking about smart contracts and kind of, I think we've heard a little bit of the network effect of inclusion too. And we've heard about B3I this morning. Could we hear a little more about what this insurance consortium B3I is, what it is you're working on, how it came about, and where you see that driving the insurance industry in the blockchain space?
Sure. Maybe a bit of background. Sometime summer last year, we at Swiss Re established our first proof of concept on blockchain. Our playground was our own internal process called intra-group retrocession, which is essentially legal entities within Swiss Re ceding risk with each other. And we looked at the business process. It's a quarterly process that we do, and the whole processing takes about 10 weeks. And we realized, that not only the cycle time, but the operation cost per transaction. And then we thought this is a good playground because this is where we see similarities to our transactions with our clients, primary insurance companies. So when we established the proof of concept, the first thing we did was to share that with our industry peers. And I think that was the time when our industry peers, including our competitor, they looked at it and said, maybe this is a base for us to really start collaborating on our mission. And the mission is really how, as a industry body, we can be at the forefront of driving standards, protocols, procedures that is required for blockchain adoption. And I'm really glad that in the last 4 or 5 months we have made significant progress. I think it is not only in terms of the number of participants in B3I now, from founding members of 5, now we are 15, but it is also the global appeal that we have. We have international players like Tokyo Marine coming from Japan, to RGA from the US, Liberty Mutual, and many other European players. I think that's required because collaboration is the key to success. As industry peers, we should come together, and our current focus, and Ed will elaborate more on this, current focus is really establish and validate the benefit hypothesis. If we can create an industry-grade prototype or MVP, which can reflect the business transactions between insurers and reinsurance companies, I think that's a huge jump forward, because that can become the base for our future activities and create that framework and standards that is required for eventual adoption.
Yeah, I think Alex Tapscott had a really good picture that I want to take. So Alex, if you're listening, I definitely would like to borrow that Rube Goldberg machine. He said for the financial or health industry, I think all industries have that. The thing that the B3I is doing, it's really 2 parts. One is just blockchain. The other is insurance industry initiative. Getting together saying this is our business process. This is where we have the waste. This is where we have the opportunities. This is where we have those threats that could come from external parties, and say how do we work through that. So the first thing is just to look at that low-hanging fruit. So the B3I consortium got together, and our steering team talked about what is a good, simple, low-hanging fruit that we can show that will actually get that point across. And I think it's a property casualty excessive loss contract that the B3I landed on to say, hey, this is low-hanging fruit. If we can prove that we can do this, we can share this information at a market and between insurer, reinsurer, that will really start to show the real-world implications of the technology and the process. And I think that's what we have to do, is we have to say real-world what we're trying to accomplish and then prove it. Answer the questions and just prove it. That's what the B3I is trying to do, is just prove it. First phase, just prove that MVP or that proof of concept, and then move into the next phases of the B3I.
So from a regulatory perspective, what are some challenges that you see in the United States and Europe and the insurance landscape?
Well, I think the biggest problem everybody's facing is that you, like in any other legal context, it's the multiplicity of regulators that you have to deal with. So insurance is a global business. The large players have the mechanisms in place to deal with US regulation, European regulation, Japanese regulation, et cetera. Small innovators that are trying to design new technology don't. And they typically get crushed by the amount of regulation. I applaud what the British government and the Singaporean governments are doing by creating the regulatory sandbox. I am a big advocate of the United States adopting some type of regulatory sandbox as well, so that innovative firms can experiment, can develop a relationship with regulators and have a meaningful dialogue, but also be able to function without having to bear the tremendous costs associated with being fully regulated.
Absolutely. What we have been constantly doing is to reach out to regulators and trigger that dialogue. I think that's the key here. They come back with some questions, and sometimes they might be simple questions, but they are important questions to be asked at this stage and clarify. Because I think it's a process of gaining that confidence so that regulators also see the benefits at the end of the story. And I must add that it is not just the regulators. I believe regulators will have an interest to the point, but it's the policymakers, the legislatures, who can create the conducive environment for it to happen much faster. And that's why I think the chamber led by Perian, Matt. They are doing a tremendous job here. And I believe we need such bodies who is driving this kind of dialogue between public and private enterprises. Yeah. And if we can do that, as we surmount some of the technology-related challenges with blockchain, in a couple of years' time, all will come together, and then we are ready for production rollouts.
I think around the smart contract portion of this specifically too is, smart contracts certainly precede the blockchain discussion, right? Code existed before blockchain. We've been talking about smart contracts. We've been talking about automation for decades in the insurance industry, in the banking industry, and capital markets in general, right? So I think the same problems that we probably had when we were talking about coding contracts, back in 2005 are the same ones that we deal with now. And it is that sort of how do you establish that legal wrapper around a contract? And then what does that mean if you're dealing with a third party or a fourth party? What jurisdiction are they in? Under what rules? What are the assets that are actually governed in these contracts? Like all those kinds of things are I think, the real nuts and bolts of the smart contract discussion. And then certainly on the digital asset side or digital currencies even, or central bank digital currencies, right? That's a whole new world, really. That's completely different, right? How can you control or create central bank digital currencies, or how can you digitize assets that we have on paper now? And when they transact across borders, who governs that? Who's under whose purview is that? So I think not only is this a collaborative effort for folks on the ground sitting here, it's also a collaborative effort between regulatory bodies across the U.S., EMEA, and APAC. Great.
So, Bo, I think you have, as we are just about out of time, we're going to go around with just a brief 1-minute closing remark from all of you. But Bo, with the Association of Government Accountants, I think government financial professionals, and that's one of the things we at the Chamber are always trying to promote, is the understanding of blockchain. I think you had something that you were starting off or kicked off yesterday. Yeah. Did you want to?
Well, we had a initial kickoff of the AGA working group for blockchain yesterday, and it was really successful. We had about 25 people in total. We're trying to share information. Debbie Bucci from HHS, I want to meet you, so we'll talk later. But let me just kind of rattle off a few of the concepts that were talked about, what government is doing. We talked about emergency responder ID verification, so FEMA, when people show up as doctors to a site. Are they doctors? Are they not doctors? How do we do that? Traveler experience. If you're going through an airport, how many checks do you have to go through? Why are they so redundant? Can we make that easier? Reduce fraud and transfer of goods across international borders. So this is a federal government agency that's looking at that. Tracking international aid. I think the number is 20% of it actually goes to Swiss bank accounts, siphoned off somehow, fraud, waste, and abuse. How do we reduce that? And then just simple asset management, tracking telephones within your organization, tracking that type of thing. So lots of good stuff coming out. And it's almost like, that term, opening the can of worms. I see it here, I see it there. And people are very excited about it. I want the federal government to actually, federal government financial managers, as well as state and local, which are the laboratories for the federal government, to define and not be defined by this situation. I want them to be part of the conversation. So hopefully we'll work with the Chamber to make sure that we move that forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks. So just real quick, a lightning round of predictions of where you see blockchain in insurance, starting with Jags.
That's a good question. I keep saying this. Unless we are able to address the technology-related challenges, for example, system integration challenges, it's very difficult for the business sponsor to commit an investment because you don't want to invest on a moving base. And I think 2017 is a year where we will do the piloting, and hopefully we are able to address those challenges, especially related to system integration. And I think in 2018 we will see first insurance applications going live.
Yeah, I'll go. So kind of a lot of experience from the current program that I work on, and I think that there is tremendous difficulty or challenges, shall we say, when you go from QA or proof of concept to implementation to production to then even adoption, right? So there's a lot of challenges there. And I would just say that currently I'm making friends and seeking out champions because the valley of despair is coming. And I just want to be prepared to be able to cross that to the promised land. So there you go.
I think blockchain for the insurance industry and the greater financial services industry will be as transformative as the internet. I think, if we go back and think about 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, how many of us had smartphones? How many of us have them today? How many of us are able to do trades and banking over a smartphone versus where we were 5, 6 years ago? But I do think the number I'll leave everyone with, I expect that by 2019, there will be at least $500 million invested by financial services firms in blockchain technology applications. And that's a conservative estimate. McKinsey said 400 million. I think they're wrong. I think it's going to be north of $500 million easily by 2019.
Well, that's a good prediction. We should check that in 5 years, right? See where we're at. I think I'm always reserved about giving predictions because, I really want to say, what's the next first step that we have to make? I think the next first step we have to make is to do something real world. Put it out there, transition to production, and get that real world case. I hope that as an ecosystem, a blockchain ecosystem, we can mature it and educate it in a way that will be as simple for people to see and use as it is for other technology frameworks to see and use. I do see a day when we're going to have blockchain engineers. I think that's in 3 to 5 years. I think those engineers are going to help business folks like ourselves say, hey, these are the things that you need to help solve that business problem, and this is the right hammer for that nail. So I do see that in 3 to 5 years.
I think it's all about ROI this year. I think that's really what is going to get people to move from this POC pilot to production, right? Is show me my Rube Goldberg machine, show me all of the people who are a part of that, show me my redundancies, the inefficiencies, all that kind of stuff, and show me how I pay for that. And then show me a peer-to-peer network with a group of peers that operate on some sort of shared protocol, and then show me the costs that are associated with that, right? That's not cost-free, and we know that. It's not a silver bullet. If you can define the delta between how I work and operate today with my Rube Goldberg machine and show me how I can operate in a peer-to-peer network and still maintain regulation and compliance in an easy and efficient way, then I think we'll see people move to production pretty quickly over the next 2 to 3 years.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and the rest of the insurance panel. I'm Jeremy Kaufman, the CEO of Library, LBRY, which does blockchain-based content distribution. I'm not on the schedule because the news I've got is a little bit too hot. But just last week, I've been working very closely with the Digital Currency Group I've been working with Perry-Ann and Jason to get a bill passed in New Hampshire that completely deregulates virtual currencies. So they will be exempt from all current state regulations. They won't be covered by money transmitter laws or anything like that. I wouldn't have been able to do it without Jason and Perry-Ann's help. They got me appointed by the governor as the industry expert on virtual currencies. They've told me who to talk to, how to give testimony, and they've been there every step of the way. And I just wanted to say thank you to them because we wouldn't have been able to do this without them. So that's it. Thank you.